quotes infused with the scent of potpourri. Films we commit to memory. Crossing the felt ropes, watching from home on my TV, looking at all my eyes can see. They tell me I view obsessively.
Hello and welcome to The Obsessive Viewer. We're a weekly podcast that reviews one or two new release titles every episode with an occasional free-for-all segment at the end that we call Potpourri. You can find more of our work, including my written reviews, full episode show notes, and the complete backlog of our episodes at obsessiveviewer.com. You can also write into the show by emailing me at matt@obsessiveviewer.com. And if you'd like to support us and get access to hundreds of exclusive episodes, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, where you can get access to content at any of our tier levels on a recurring monthly subscription basis, or you can buy individual collections a la carte in the Patreon shop section. Recently on Patreon, I haven't posted as much as I would like to, but I will be having immediate reaction recordings for probably Twisters, and also A Quiet Place Day 1 and Inside Out 2, which were supposed to be the episode reviews last week, but I started a new job last month, and I've been exhausted and everything, so I didn't get that episode out. So those reviews are going to go on Patreon. Again, that is at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. You can sign up there, support the show, and get a bunch of content. I'm your host, Matt Hurt, and you can find me on social media, including Letterboxd, at obsessiveviewer. And later in the show, we'll be reviewing the concluding chapter of Ty West's X trilogy, MaXXXine. But before that, we're going to go over some recent movie news, probably, and then review the new Oz Perkins thriller, Longlegs, in a non-spoiler and spoiler feature review. And joining me today, for the first time this year that isn't the year in review episode, I have two guests. So it's a packed panel of three people, including myself, and joining me are the my friends and IFJ colleagues and critics whose work can be found on MidwestFilmJournal.com. There is Mitch Ringenberg. Hi, Mitch.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey. Going well. Hope you're doing well. And then also joining us is Sam Watermeier. Sam, how's it going?
Good. How are you guys?
Good.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I should mention real quick, just as like a fun fact for listeners, Mitch and I go way back to high school, writing on the Carmel High School Highlight together, and
Nice.
both reviewing movies. So we're still doing this thing.
Nice.
Yeah, that is pretty wild. I actually looked up, you can find like a lot of the stuff we wrote on like the Highlight, data or whatever, their archive on their site. And I saw, Sam, we collaborated on 2009 Oscar predictions.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's pretty far back now.
That's
Getting old.
wow. That's awesome. I'm so jealous that you guys got to write about movies in high school, because when I was on the newspaper staff in high school, I wanted to review movies, but I got picked over by someone else got it instead of me. I can't remember who, but I ended up writing an opinion column, which was not. I'm pretty sure that Speedway does not have like an archive of the oh God, what was it? Plugged In newspaper. And thank God they don't, because there was like, my memory of it is some pretty cringy stuff. Yeah.
People would read your column and go, Matt really put the hurt on us today.
Yes.
Oh,
Here's the thing.
Putting the hurt on Speedway High School.
Yes. I would say that would be perfectly fine if that's what they said. I am terrified of what they actually said. Because they're, yeah. Anyway, neurotic, anxious, high school kids such as me, I should not have had an opinion column in the newspaper. But it was fun though. It was a fun thing. So anyway, how are you guys doing? What have you guys written recently? And what have you guys had posted over at Midwest Film Journal and anywhere else that you have film criticism pumping out at?
Last couple movies I've reviewed a lot of horror stuff this year for MFJ. I just published a review for Longlegs, which we'll be talking about later in the episode. And also, I think last month I wrote about what's probably my favorite horror movie, maybe my favorite movie of the year so far, certainly in the top 5, In a Violent Nature, which
yes.
I thought was amazing.
Yeah, it's this is kind of a perfect panel because while Mitch reviewed Longlegs, I reviewed MaXXXine for Midwest Film Journal. And I think that was my most recent review. So it's fitting to have us both on. Yeah,
that's a very very fortuitous collection or something. But Sam, you also reviewed Daddy-O and Tuesday. And
Daddy-O is the worst movie of the year.
That is
I'm
so
usually
wild.
And I don't think I'm very harsh on most movies. I mean, the running joke with my film fanatic friends is that, well, I guess I started this joke. If a movie is audible and visible, I will probably like it.
Mm-hmm.
Daddy-O is just awful. It's set entirely in a New York taxi cab, and it revolves around a conversation between Dakota Johnson and Sean Penn. And Sean Penn just plays the most cliched, streetwise cabbie who basically mansplains to Dakota Johnson for an hour and a half about why her relationships don't work. Just really cringy stuff. Very antiquated ideas about relationships, romantic and otherwise. Daddy-O is just awful. So I won't rant about it further.
I haven't had a chance to see Daddy-O yet. But it's crazy because I was excited for it because of the trailer. Like the trailer made it seem like a good, like introspective, kind of thought-provoking kind of character study, but seeing the reactions from it, we'll see if I get around to it.
But I'd say, it's one of the few disappointing movies I've seen this year. I've enjoyed a lot of stuff, so.
Yeah, it's been a really good year so far. Mitch, other than In a Violent Nature, what else has stood out to you?
Some recent movies. I just watched something called Life After Fighting. I don't know if you guys have heard of this movie. It just came out a few weeks ago. So it's essentially this guy named Bren Foster, who is clearly some sort of martial arts champion expert. He is just this beefy guy. He kind of looks like Eric Bana crossed with Colin Farrell. And he wrote, directed, and stars in this movie, essentially about a guy who runs this karate studio, meets this girl who has a really evil ex-husband, and he falls in with some basically human traffickers, or he gets mixed up in this human trafficking plot and has to, kill all the human traffickers. I know that makes it sound like this gross, Sound of Freedom style movie. It's not. That the human trafficking angle is just an excuse, for bad guys to get their faces, beat in. And the last 40 minutes of this movie just features some of the coolest fight choreography I've probably seen, since
nice.
John Wick 4 or whatever. It's not quite that good. I mean, this is very much like a straight to video movie with like a generic cover that you would see on Redbox, but I highly recommend checking it out if you just like want some badass like martial arts action, life after fighting. I thought it was really good.
Very nice. That sounds really cool. I'll talk about it in Potpourri if we get to it, but I've just watched a bunch of stuff. It's been kind of nice to get back into going to the movie theater and like getting into more of a rhythm with it. Like over the weekend I saw both of these movies over the weekend, and then like it's nice that the last couple of weeks I've been using my A-List like regularly. So it's been good. And speaking of A-List, I have some disheartening news for listeners who have listened numerous times to the podcast. If you guys know, whenever it seems like basically whenever Brent is on the show, he and I inevitably talk about A-List and this loophole that he had turned me on to, where if you buy tickets or if you reserve A-List tickets through Fandango, you get Fandango rewards points. Once those accumulate to like like a set number, you get a $5 gift card to Voodoo or toward another ticket. So what Brent was doing and what I ended up doing as well was just if we didn't use all of our A-List tickets on Thursday when it switches over, we reserve a movie and don't go because we're not planning on going. And then it just accumulates free points. But the disheartening thing is that loophole is closed now. Yeah, it sucks, but also we had such a good run with it. This is like years. Like I have multiple, basically what I would do is I would get the points to get the $5 gift card to Voodoo. And basically I would use that $5 gift card on something that appealed to me that's on like the $5 movie sale thing. So
yep, same.
Yeah. So I would just like, I've bought so many movies for free through that, but it's a shame because now they don't count. Like that's A-List overall. Like they don't count at all toward the points system, which makes sense, but it's a shame.
Well, here's the issue, and I'm sure you've figured this out, but I don't use A-List. I typically go to like Flicks Brew House, which is very close to where I am in Carmel, and decent theater. But I just like the proximity. But yeah, when I use Fandango to just buy my tickets in advance, the problem is when you get that $5 thing and you buy a $5 movie, technically with the Fandango, fees that you get for buying it online, you're actually spending more than $5 for that movie. Those 4 tickets, those fees have added up to like $7. So when they give you that free $5 movie, it's cool, but it's also like, well, I also paid $7 more for these tickets than I would have if I just went to the theater. That
makes total sense, but that's why the A-List of it all works so well, because it waives all the fees. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that loophole close. That is a pretty genius scheme.
Yeah, it's okay. I've shed my tears. Sam, do you have any inside info on how you screw over movie theaters at all?
I'm not sneaking around like you guys.
How do you further kill this dying industry, Sam?
Right.
I'm actually not a part of any special rewards program. I have a hard enough time keeping track of like any rewards program. I just tend not to use it. I don't know how many times I'll get like a gas station card and just never use it again. And they'll say like, "Are you a Speedway member?" And I'll just say no, even though I am. I don't know. I mean, I guess that is kind of stupid not to take advantage of it, but I'm kind of lazy with it.
I understand that, but like also those gas station rewards are really good too, because you get a free soft drink once you buy like 10 or 12 of them or something. So it adds up eventually. I swear. I'm not addicted. But also speaking as well about movie theaters, this is a good transition. big things are happening here in Indianapolis. It was finally announced. Well, okay. In July, I think it was announced that the new Criterion 4K restoration of Seven Samurai, my favorite movie of all time, was going to be in theaters. And when it was announced, it seemed like it was only going to be like New York and LA. And it was announced recently that the Can Movie Theater here in Indianapolis is going to be showing Seven Samurai, the 4K restoration, the weekend of July 26th. So it's going to be 2 shows on Friday the 26th, 2 shows on Saturday the 27th, 2 shows on Sunday the 28th, and 1 show on Monday the 29th. And I'm very excited. I'm just so excited. Like I got to see Seven Samurai in that theater a couple of years ago. And then I famously saw it at the Art Craft several years ago. And it's just exciting that I'm going to get to see it a third time in the theater. So, are either of you, excited about this, interested in it, or should I fuck off?
I'm like absolutely thrilled because at the risk of getting kicked off this podcast and losing my IFJA credentials, I have never seen Seven Samurai. I've seen other Kurosawa. I've seen Rashomon. I've seen Ran, which I thought was amazing. Throne of Blood. I love a good like Shakespeare adaptation. Obviously, the runtime was a little bit intimidating for Seven Samurais, and it's just one of those ones. Back when I was first really getting into film in high school and college, I would blow through all these classics. That was just one for whatever reason I missed. So seeing it on the big screen for the first time, obviously, I'm really excited. I'll definitely be there that weekend.
Nice.
I actually have some inside info here. So Mitch says, he doesn't know why he missed this one. I happen to know that he actually told me that he would rather watch Kangaroo Jack than the Seven
Which I have seen in theaters.
Yeah, and I kept trying to get him to watch Seven Samurai, and he always had some other movie. It started with Kangaroo Jack. I remember there was 3,000 Miles to Graceland at one point.
Christ.
Master of Disguise with Dana Carvey.
Yeah, the Flintstones Viva Las Vegas.
Viva Rock Vegas.
Viva Rock Vegas, excuse me. It just, a movie just always came up that he said he would rather watch, and I never understood it. I'm glad you're finally getting around to Seven Samurai.
Yeah,
well, I had my priorities, but I'm gonna, pencil in some time for this one.
Yeah.
Marmaduke, that was another one.
A classic.
All right, I'm just gonna take this voodoo doll away because I'm too tempted.
No, I'm thrilled for Mitch to see it for the first time. I think that'll be a cool treat. I haven't seen it in years, so I'm excited as well.
Yeah. Yep. Also, random, but like, I can't remember if I mentioned this on the podcast or not, but a few months ago, Criterion Channel launched their Criterion 24/7 thing on the channel, where it's like basically they have movies playing at any given time. And when it launched, I remember the aforementioned Brent messaged me and was like, "Hey, Seven Samurai's on there now." And I was like, "Oh, cool." So I turned it on, and I had errands to run and everything. And I was like, "I'm just gonna leave this on for Pizza, to have her watch Seven Samurai and have her get a little cultured in her film journey." So yeah, so the cat has seen Seven Samurai. Thank you. Yes. But yeah, so anyway, that's the weekend of the 26th. I was considering going twice, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, very exciting. Very, very exciting. Can't wait to see the 4K restoration. Yeah. And that's a movie that, like, I've owned so many different versions of it and so many different, like, I've watched it in so many different ways that, like, I've talked about on the podcast and everything. But I remember when the most recent Blu-ray release from Criterion came out, like it kind of blew my mind, because it was the first time that I could watch Seven Samurai on a single disc, and I was just like, oh, this is so nice. I don't have to change discs or anything, because I've had every other version, but yeah. But anyway, that's basically all I have for news before the reviews. What do you guys say to us jumping into our first review of the evening of Oz Perkins' Longlegs? How do you guys feel about that? All right. Let's do it. So, Longlegs, of course, we're going to do a non-spoiler and spoiler review. When we switch over to spoilers, I'm going to play a clip from the trailer to break it apart there. And also check the show notes for timestamps to navigate it. The show notes are available in your podcast app or at obsessiveviewer.com/OV434. And so, yeah, let's go into this review. Longlegs is in theaters and was released in theaters on July 12th, 2024. The premise, according to IMDb, is: in pursuit of a serial killer, an FBI agent uncovers a series of occult clues that she must solve to end his terrifying killing spree. Writer and director for this movie was Oz Perkins, and the cast includes Maika Monroe, Nicolas Cage, Blair Underwood, and Alicia Witt. So, guys, we are in the review, the non-spoiler review for Longlegs. What were your guys' expectations for this movie, and how did you guys feel about it?
Well, I'll just start by saying I think this movie had one of the most memorable and effective marketing campaigns in years.
Yes.
The first teaser trailer hooked me. I think it's like a family photo with the sound of a 911 call in the background. Very eerie, mysterious, and the trailers stayed pretty mysterious for the most part. They were, short and sweet and spooky. A lot of the marketing campaign was based in how much it didn't reveal Nicolas Cage's villain, and hyped him up to be this kind of mythic, larger than life, monstrous figure, eventually showing little bits and pieces of him, but never his full face or body. And I totally got swept away by that. I was a sucker for the marketing campaign. And I had a blast with the movie. I couldn't help but feel a little underwhelmed at times. It didn't really strike me as the scariest film of the decade as it's been talked about. But it's kind of a great nostalgia fest in some respects. It recalls Silence of the Lambs, Seven, even true crime cases from the 90s, like the Jean-Benet Ramsey case, and the Satanic Panic of the 80s as well. And the performances are great across the board. I kind of had the same problems with this that I did with Osgood Perkins' debut, The Blackcoat's Daughter, in that I was really swept up in the deliberately paced first hour, and then I felt like it kind of rushed into grislier horror elements in the third act. I get that hurried feeling kind of is supposed to mirror the chaotic nature of the plot unfolding, but it felt kind of rushed to me. But overall, I still had a really good time with this movie, and I'd love to see it again sometime soon, actually, to see how it holds up for me, kind of away from the initial hype.
Nice. Mitch, how about you?
Yeah, I am pretty close to Sam, I think. I really liked it a lot. And I don't know, is it possible to say that even though a movie was very good, it was still a little disappointing?
Yeah.
And, I don't want to sound overly negative on a movie that I really enjoyed and would recommend. I do think that the marketing campaign for Neon was a little bit of a double-edged sword, because when you so effectively market something as the scariest movie ever made, I think you're absolutely going to draw in some people. But unfortunately, I think you're going to also receive kind of a belated backlash once people go and see the movie and see that's really not even trying to be the scariest movie ever made. I felt like the tone of the movie, I found, I don't know how you guys feel. I thought the tone of the movie was actually pretty different than like the tone of a lot of the trailers. To me, this reminded me a lot of, I don't know if you guys have seen Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Cure.
No.
It's a very similar movie in the sense that there is a killer who seems to be murdering people without ever entering the homes. And there's this kind of air of possible supernatural quality going on. And there's a very like unhinged killer at the center. And, so this is a very kind of one-to-one with that movie. But whereas that movie, I thought it really used a lot of ambiguity as part of its power. Kind of what isn't said about what the killer is capable of is what makes it scary. I felt that this movie, the first two acts, Oz Perkins, he is like, has shown himself to be a master of tone and atmosphere that has this kind of airless, foreboding, just sense of dread that really works well. And all of his movies have that exact same tone, but he does it very, very well. I find that this movie, like his first movie, The Black Coat's Daughter, my issue with it that I think maybe caused it to fall short of greatness is that it kind of over-explains itself in the third act. I felt like there's a big exposition drop that I'm not, obviously without revealing anything, I just think that it explains things to the point where it almost raises some questions about like inconsistencies. Where if you stop and think about it, you're like, I don't know if this actually makes sense. Like now I have more questions than I did before. And I think that shows maybe that someone like Oz Perkins maybe doesn't have the confidence to let some of the audience do the heavy lifting. And who knows, maybe that was like Neon, the studio, being like, no, like we need you to do this a little bit more. But I did feel like his first film kind of had that issue as well. So I mean, it's a really strong, really fun movie. I mean, it has, like I said, great atmosphere, lots of FBI agents looking through old satanic texts and dimly lit libraries. I mean, I'm gonna have a great time if you're showing me that kind of stuff. And I'm a firm believer that Nicolas Cage is one of the greatest actors of all time, one of the best we have. And even when one of his performances doesn't necessarily work for me, it's interesting. There's a take there. He's doing something. And I do feel like there are times where Nicolas Cage's performance almost threatens to break the tone of the movie. And I feel like sometimes handling like a really kooky Nicolas Cage performance is almost like handling like nitroglycerin, like for a director. It's like handle with care. Like you have a very powerful force here, like use it wisely. And I think that he mostly does. Again, without giving any spoilers, I expected this to maybe be like Nicolas Cage's version of Hannibal Lecter, like this super genius serial killer. It's not that at all.
No.
what it's doing is actually, I think, pretty unique for this genre, the serial killer like procedural. And yeah, so I mean, I really liked it, and it's cool to just see one of these procedurals done with like more overt horror tones. It really leans in to some horror tropes in a way I think like the first season of True Detective or Silence of the Lambs even were a little hesitant to do. So I do appreciate the movie going for it in the third act. I think it's just a little bit clunky, but overall, I had a really good time with it.
Nice. And it's interesting because I feel like I'm at a disadvantage because I haven't seen The Black Coat's Daughter. But I'm kind of, I think I'm higher on it than you guys both are, but I also am somewhat in agreement, like with you. Like that third act it does kind of shift things around a little bit, and it does try to have its cake and eat it too in terms of like explaining things and getting to a point at the end. And that is a little, that does break the kind of whole stride of the movie, that all of that goodwill that was done in the tone and atmosphere building in the first two acts, kind of, they don't pay off as well with that when it's an overly explanatory or overly different final act of the movie. Even though it tries to tie things together pretty well, I think that it is a small shortcoming of the movie. The finale of it is a shortcoming, I think, but everything else just worked really, really well for me. Like you said, Mitch, the atmosphere, the tone is so good. The way that Oz Perkins just grabs us, and like that nostalgia feel, like you mentioned, Sam, like of it being a period piece in the 90s, like it feels very evocative of that, not only of the era, but of the kind of detective serial killer procedurals of that era as well. It's an interesting kind of fine line there where it's depicting this time, this period setting, while also kind of, I don't know if I would say paying homage to that kind of genre that was all the craze in the mid to late 90s. But it's definitely refers to it in certain aspects, and is honors it in certain respects too. And the obvious comparison is obviously to make to Silence of the Lambs and even Seven to an extent, and other high profile movies like that. But I'm just going to echo what you guys said, but like you said, Mitch, the way that it plugs in the horror aspect of it, really sets it apart. And I found it just really weird and unsettling and unnerving and just wonderfully done. I really enjoyed it.
I'm going to jump in real quick. Because I forgot to mention another 90s reference. This movie ended up being way more like the X-Files than I expected.
Yeah.
I think it's, like you just said, it's really weird, much weirder than the marketing lets on. And the marketing sells it as this kind of dead serious procedural. And it's really darkly funny and twisted, and it does delve into otherworldly elements like the X-Files, sometimes not that effectively, in my opinion, but still in an entertaining way. So yeah, I just wanted to add that real quick.
Yeah. And the satanic panic aspect of it all is really, really gripping as well. And it plays into that pretty well too, with the occult stuff and having it toe that line of X-Files-y sort of supernatural stuff, but keeping it somewhat grounded throughout the movie is really an exercise in talent from Oz Perkins, I think. And evident of that.
And I'll also just add that I think, like the marketing campaign, this movie is most effective when it's building an air of mystery around the Longlegs character.
Yes.
it's funny how it's less effective when it finally reveals him, or at least it was for me. And I, like Mitch said, I think Nicolas Cage sort of breaks the movie's tone a little bit. It's still great fun to watch, but it is very jarring. His performance feels like it kind of comes from a completely different movie and at some points. And I guess I say that as sort of maybe like a warning to people who are about to see the movie. Like I said, I still had fun with it, but it's a weird thing to experience because sometimes his unhinged nature kind of like sucks the wind out of the movie's sails. It did for me, at least. And I'll go into that more in spoilers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I think his performance worked for me a little bit more than it did for you, Sam. I think there were just like, for me, there were just some moments where I was like, I felt like maybe Osgood Perkins didn't really have much direction for him in this scene, and just kind of wanted him to sort of let loose, which is always great fun. But for the most part, I really did find him effective. And I did think it was just so interesting. I guess it just speaks to like how strong of a director Perkins is in terms of like that commanding that atmosphere, that really on paper, this Nicolas Cage performance isn't super different than something that we've seen in like Vampire's Kiss, right?
Yeah.
But in this context, it like takes on a whole different meaning. It's much more creepy instead of like campy. And I thought that was interesting how like kind of putting him in this whole new context really felt different, even if he is using some of his kind of like classic trademark like rage cage ticks.
Yeah, I feel like there's something to the fact that given what this movie is, like there's a lot of holding back of Longlegs until he's more prominent in the movie as it goes on. Just that's the nature of this kind of subgenre of movie. But I think that there is something to the tone that's established and the kind of moody, everything from the music to the cinematography to just the way that all of the tension and mood is built, that I wouldn't say is undercut by Nicolas Cage, but I feel like when he is on screen as Longlegs, he goes so big with it that it is, I can understand why there's a little bit of a jolt from that, because we've got this like methodical, like gloomy, grimy procedural, and then suddenly we have like this larger than life like almost caricature sort of portrayal to an extent, but it still works really well. So I don't know if I'm really like, that's not necessarily a criticism of it. I loved his performance, but I do see like I can see why there would be a little bit of a jolt there.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say real quick. It's funny because we all saw Silence of the Lambs outside of the hype around it.
Yeah.
So
right.
we kind of saw it in an era that, where marketing was different, obviously. So it'd be interesting to, I don't know, ask like a teenager who's maybe not as tech savvy. Well, no, I'm trying to say like this movie sort of, it and its marketing campaign are so symbiotic that it's kind of hard to talk about it without talking about the hype.
Yeah, this is one of the more extreme examples in recent memory where like expectations are informing your viewing experience, I think. Yeah. And when you watch something like Silence of the Lambs, and I don't know, maybe you guys would really disagree, obviously a masterpiece, one of the great films of that decade, but if somebody said, hey, Anthony Hopkins in this movie is the scariest character you've ever seen in your life. I don't necessarily think like Hannibal Lecter. He's like a fun character, and he's obviously completely different than Nicolas Cage's Longlegs character in this, but I wouldn't think of like Hannibal Lecter as necessarily like a terrifying character. He's a very fun, and honestly, even like he's a very broad, big performance too, what like Anthony Hopkins is doing there. So I wonder, if I had similar expectations for a movie like that walking in, would I be a little disappointed or like, oh, like that wasn't quite what I expect? I'm not sure. Obviously Longlegs is not as good as Silence of the Lambs, but I don't know. There's just, I think it's very hard to divorce the expectations of this movie, like you said, because the marketing was just so effective. And I mean, it worked. Yeah. Like, the movie was a smash hit for an indie film over the weekend.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think we live in a time of expectations that are a little too extreme. Like a horror movie has to either be Silence of the Lambs or it's terrible. And it's funny, like, what our reaction is, which is that it's very enjoyable despite all of these flaws. And we can talk about the flaws without getting wildly upset, like film Twitter seems to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. We just live in an interesting time for film discourse that's kind of based on extremism and hyperbole.
Yeah, we really are. And I think I might bring out some of that extremism and hyperbole. It's been a while since I've seen Silence of the Lambs. I think the last time I watched it was in 2014. And I, for some reason, rated it 3.5 stars. And I
gotta go.
I don't think that's accurate. Like, I really need to revisit that because I don't know what I was thinking with 3.5 stars. Because it's clearly like a 2.5. I'm just kidding, of course.
That's pretty generous. Yeah, I mean, I used to have that reaction when I was younger all the time, and it would take me years to finally appreciate how amazing a movie is because I was introduced to it as, this is one of the greatest films ever made. This is like an all-timer canonical like masterpiece. And I think sometimes like that's not a great mindset,
right?
To walk into a movie. And I mean, I could go so off the rails here talking about how I feel like there are certain film Twitter personalities, critics who I totally believe if, say IndieWire or Screen Crush or a website like that or Slash Film sees this movie at the premiere and gives it a really positive review. Like, I believe that, even though there's that kind of festival hype that maybe increases your enjoyment of something. Like Nicolas Cage is right next to you, right? Like when you're watching a movie, like obviously you might like it more, but sometimes do you guys feel like on Twitter, there's just those people coming out of the festival who it's like, this movie will change you. There's before Longlegs and there's after Longlegs. Like, and you will forever think about the moment you saw Longlegs in that context. I feel like it was similar with movies like Joker several years back and stuff where the hyperbole was so intense that by the time you see it and it's just a good movie, it like leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And I should note too that the cinema score for Longlegs was a C+, which is pretty bad. Yeah. So it sounds like a lot of the audience going to see it did not get what they wanted. I'd be curious to see. Again, I think it's great, but I'd be curious to see like what the second weekend box office numbers look like for this.
Right.
That I think would be really telling.
That's, there's a longer and bigger conversation to have about film Twitter, film discourse, and all of that. But I just want to touch on it real quick and just say that it's so interesting that, yes, there are those critics that are like, that it's like the second, like this movie impregnated me at Cannes. like those type of hyperbolic things, but also like there's also the conversation surrounding it, like the people that aren't at film festivals that are hyping it up or seeing it that are hyping it up that are maybe, I feel like there's a certain level or a certain amount of people online who need to have something to say, need to have like a very big opinion about something. And I don't know if I believe their opinion or like believe that they truly believe like this is the greatest thing ever, or if they just really, really want to stand out from the crowd. I think that's a part of it too.
Well, I'm not a crackpot here, but I do think too this, those kind of big reactions that's how you get your name in the trailer or on the poster or on that, so again, not saying like every person who loved Longlegs is when they saw it, premiere at Fantastic Fest or whatever festival it was that it premiered at, was being insincere.
Right.
But I do think that's a thing that seems to be happening like more and more, where I just kind of have like a little bit of a side eye, when some movies get such intense praise. Yeah.
And let me just say, just to get back to the review and everything, Nicolas Cage is a revelation. And I think this is you will be on the edge of your seat throughout this entire movie.
He's a different actor, really.
Yeah.
He's
I will say in all seriousness, it is very cool to see in the last 4 or 5 years, Nicolas Cage seems to be taking a lot of interesting roles in independent films, from like Dream Scenario to Pig, Mandy, this, we had a good decade where he'd maybe do one of those movies in 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's very cool to see him, jumping onto just really interesting projects like this. And even if Longlegs contains some shades of his other performances, he's such a distinct actor. I think it's impossible for him to, for you not to recall other performances because he's so singular. But this is a type of character he's never played before, and he's been in movies for 40 years now. And the fact that we're still seeing like new sides of him, and him taking on like things he's never done before is, really commendable.
What's really cool is that with this movie, his name is really selling it. Like,
yes,
he's a movie star again. Like, it's really cool to see him go from these B pulpy movies to this, where so much of the expectations are just based on his involvement in it. I mean, he hasn't really been that big since like his 90s action phase with like The Rock and Con Air. So I think Longlegs marks a pretty exciting time for him.
Yeah. Like in the late 90s, early 2000s, if he was gone in 60 seconds, then now he's back. That's so dumb. I really liked Gone in 60 Seconds, by the way. It's dumb.
It's fun.
Yeah. It's dumb, but it has some of the best character names I've ever heard in a movie.
I just remember he has really cool hair in that movie.
And he does the whole like thing with his fingers. Yeah. So good. But yeah, the Longlegs. Let's talk about it as the scariest movie ever. Like, did you guys feel like, I know we talked about it not being like the most terrifying thing ever or what have you, which I always feel like in terms of marketing, that's such a misnomer, or it's something that's just such a big statement, but it's for such a subjective thing. Like, it's just so like, what is the metrics that you're gauging that from? But I will say that it was disturbing to me. Like, I don't necessarily get like frightened by movies these days or anything just because I watch so many movies, but it definitely like unsettled me. And like, I got this sense throughout it where, like, in terms of a horror feeling, it's more about like being unnerved in the moment, in the atmosphere of it. And I think that that's the best quality of it, is just the overall atmosphere. So were you guys scared?
The opening sequence was genuinely unsettling. Longlegs is introduced in an encounter with a child that's just this really creepy moment of stranger danger. And you see a brief flash of his full face, and it made me jump.
Nice.
And that moment really hooked me, and I was like, all right, I'm ready to be scared out of my mind. That was surprisingly scary to me. Yeah, I think it's really tense throughout. There's another sequence early on where Micah Monroe's character is on the hunt for another serial killer. And that's a really tense sequence that is kind of creepy in a similar way to like Prisoners or Zodiac, in terms of something really scary happening in the middle of suburbia. I think it grew less scary for me in the third act, but I still had fun with it. I mean, as a horror fan, I don't necessarily watch these movies to be scared. I kind of watch them to see how imaginatively they pull off creepy ideas. But yeah, I was definitely uncomfortable throughout most of it.
Nice.
Yeah. I would say that I also found the movie very tense and eerie, and there were some moments that I found just moments, like isolated moments, that I found genuinely unsettling. A couple being that very opening scene, I agree, is one of the best parts of the movie, as well as there's like a phone call where a dad is essentially talking about murdering his family. As he's like watching his wife sleep or his kids sleep. And I also found that just the breathy voiceover during that scene, I found that really unsettling. But yeah, you know, I am a horror junkie. I mean, you probably have the two big horror guys of the IFJA on this podcast right now.
Right.
And being like a horror junkie, I'm always chasing like a movie that will genuinely rattle me. Every once in a while you find one. This is not one of those, I think. And I will say that I saw this with my wife, Devin, and she doesn't need a lot to get really scared. Actually, one of the first horror movies I ever saw with her was It Follows with Mike and Monroe.
Nice.
Way back when. And she was losing it during that. And I'll say that she watched Longlegs with me and she was fine. So not that makes the movie bad, but I will say it's like, I didn't find it incredibly terrifying, although I didn't really find that to be a disappointment or something I would like knock against the movie. Because like I said, I was like, I don't even think the movie is really just trying to kind of have this mood. And I don't necessarily think it's trying to be the scariest thing you've ever seen.
Right.
So I didn't really hold that against the movie, because most horror movies I see don't have that effect on me. So, that's kind of where I'm at. I thought it was effective, but not super scary.
Nice. I agree. So kind of closing thoughts and non-spoilers, and we can go into spoilers and kind of dissect the third act and everything. I ended up rating this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I know that Osgood Perkins is working on the Monkey Stephen King adaptation, so that's exciting.
Can't wait for that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm excited.
It's already shot. It's already done.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, it has like a release date and everything.
He filmed 3 movies in 15 months for Neon.
Jesus.
So he has 2 more already in the can after this.
That's incredible. That's amazing. So yeah, I rated it 4 stars. I don't know if it'll end up on my top 10, but it's a very, very strong movie, and I might also check it out again. I might rewatch it while it's still in theaters. We'll see. How did you guys end up rating it, and will it be on your top 10? Do you think? Sam, do you want to go first?
Sure. I was really wanting this to be a 5-star movie.
Mm-hmm.
I rated it tentatively 3.5. I might go 4. My significant other, Jen, gave me a lot of shit for rating it 3.5. He was like, I know you enjoyed it more than that. You're full of shit. But it didn't quite, I didn't quite like fall madly in love with it like I wanted to, but I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Nice. And Mitch, would you rate it in top 10 worthy?
I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought, like I said, I thought it was really, really good. I liked it a lot. I could see myself going either way, honestly, on a rewatch in terms of my appreciation for it, but I think I would probably enjoy it more on a rewatch because it was a movie that maybe had me slightly underwhelmed going in. However, it has like oddly stuck with me since I saw it on Friday. And to me, I think that's always the sign that I'm going to appreciate something more.
Totally.
Yeah. And in terms of like horror movies this year, I feel like between In a Violent Nature, MaXXXine, Longlegs, we have Robert Eggers' Nosferatu coming out.
Yes.
I'm forgetting. I mean, we're eating good.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Horror is at a it's not stopping. It's incredible. And so you might say that this movie could have the legs to get you to appreciate it more. I don't know. But yeah, so those are our non-spoiler thoughts on Longlegs. You can follow Sam at Sam Movie Man on Letterboxd and Mitch at Wounded_Kite.
Yep.
Okay.
You got it.
Yes. And we're going to go ahead and go into spoilers for Longlegs. I'm going to play a clip from the trailer. If you want to avoid spoilers, go to the show notes for timestamps. And if not, just check out this clip from the trailer and we'll be back spoiling Longlegs.
Don't move. Is it scary being an FBI agent?
The letter was left with the bodies. We have 10 letters like it over the past 30 years. And all of them signed with one word. Longlegs.
He'll kill. And kill again.
There she is. You could have made nice.
All right, spoilers on for Longlegs. Yeah, I mean, God, I know we talked about it, but just Nicolas Cage's performance, like that, like tone that he uses in that trailer it's so creepy. It's very creepy and very good.
I just realized now that sound in the trailer is him saying cuckoo. I didn't realize it before.
Oh yeah.
that kind of blew my mind.
That's awesome. Yeah. I don't think I didn't even register with me. Wow. But yeah, spoilers on for Longlegs. Let's talk about like the third act. What didn't work for you guys? And what did? Mitch, do you want to start?
Yeah. So for me, I thought, honestly, a lot of people I saw complaining that like, oh, it's about like a satanic doll. And I heard an interview where Nicolas Cage basically said he was playing like a possessed Geppetto in this movie. And I can see why some people think that's a little too silly, those plot developments and clashes with the movie's tone. I was fine with it. Like, I thought it was cool that the movie wanted to dive into just some crazy horror. Like, we're just going full-blown horror movie, like satanic possession, evil dolls. I'm down. Sign me up. That didn't ruin the experience for me. I just felt like it's a nitpick, but it kind of stuck with me. It just still kind of bothers me is I just think that the way the movie grinds to a halt has this voiceover narration and this montage that explains like, well, here's why Micah Monroe's mother is a serial killer, which was a cool reveal. I did not see that coming. But here's why she's a serial killer. Here's how the dolls work. She has to bring it to one house. The birthday has to be on this day. It all just is like a little too convoluted for me. And it's like a little bit over explanation. I don't think I needed that much of an explanation. And there's also, it just leaves some plot inconsistencies. Like, how did Blair Underwood, who gives a great performance in this movie, but how did he, as like the head detective, how did he not go, my daughter's birthday's on that date too?
I thought that too. Yeah.
Like maybe I should just let weird strangers into my house with dolls, or like maybe that should like raise some alarm to me, knowing how the agent who I directly work with is so personally tied to this case. Maybe I should just have my guard up a little more. And then when it's like, it's kind of implied Micah Monroe, she gets a call from like the devil at the end saying like, come to the house, or like a demon, and then she runs over there. There's just some things that just kind of didn't make a ton of sense for me, from like a character standpoint or like just a logic standpoint. And I'm not the guy who goes, cinema sins, this doesn't make sense. But the movie goes to such lengths to explain it to you that it kind of forces you to, forces you to kind of doubt it, or, it almost points to its own flaws. And even like Micah Monroe at the end, when Blair Underwood just goes into the kitchen, takes 20 minutes to walk in there with his wife and then stab her. Kind of like, she's not gonna try to stop this at all. She's not, I thought that was a little odd. So there's just little things I could spend the rest of the podcast like nitpicking, but like overall, I still thought it was cool. I enjoyed how it went into full overt horror, and I did find, for the most part, that final set piece or that final sequence where she's at the girl's birthday party. Everybody is oddly calm, but there's like that tension. I did find that like a really tense and memorable climax for the movie. So yeah, I did think it, it mostly worked for me. What about you, Sam?
I enjoyed the mother being Longlegs' accomplice. I also thought that was a neat little nod to Psycho, the mother in Psycho. Of course, Osgood Perkins is the son of Anthony Perkins, the star of Psycho. So I thought that worked on kind of a neat meta level. I guess for me, I wish the big reveal was based on brainwashing and cult leader seduction rather than literally satanic stuff. Because I think the movie was, up until that point, exploring this contrast in the Nicolas Cage character between his sort of mythic reputation and his dreary reality. Like, the beginning sets him up as this kind of mythic monster, and then there's a sequence where a very like ordinary everyday slice of life with him where he goes into a hardware store. And in that scene, he just kind of seems like a sad creep. And there's a moment with the girl behind the counter where he's doing this sort of hypnotic dance for her and sort of playing this game of peekaboo. And you get the sense that maybe he's trying to put her in some kind of trance, but she just yells for her dad and says, Dad, that gross guy is here again. So it's kind of establishing this like juxtaposition between his delusions of himself as this like satanic figure and the reality that he's just kind of a sad creep. So I guess I wish that the ending had tied that together with a reveal that, he was just brainwashing people and leading them to do these evil deeds like people did during the Satanic Panic in the 80s.
That's really interesting because I didn't read it that way. Like when he was in the hardware store, in the moment I was thinking that, oh, this is going to be his next victim. Like the family is going to be the next one that he gets. I'll be interested to go back and watch it again because I'm not. Yeah, I didn't pick up on that.
It hit me a little differently too. I do kind of see how he is like slightly sort of like the butt of the joke kind of in that scene. And like you said, Sam, it's like, oh, well, it turns out he really does have like a supernatural connection to like the devil. But to me, I didn't find it deflated it too much. Just because to me, I'm like, okay, this is a store he frequents for like his doll supplies. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, they have to kind of not see him as too much of a threat.
Right.
That's
otherwise,
a good point. Yeah.
Knocking on this guy's door immediately. And I did kind of find that a little bit realistic. I still found the scene creepy. That's the thing. Cause I'm just like, oh, we're finally seeing Nicolas Cage's, character here. But I still, also just enjoyed because I'm like, that does feel like something a teenager could potentially do. Like one reaction they might have, which is just like, who the hell is this guy? Like,
yeah.
So I don't know, that didn't deflate it too much for me, but it's definitely a scene that does not go in the direction that you expect it to.
Yeah, and I mean, it didn't like ruin the entire movie for me or anything, but it did. That was kind of one of those jarring moments where I felt myself kind of drifting from the like dread-soaked atmosphere. Like it kind of pulled me out of it. The scene unfolds in this sort of like dull, awkward way that I just found kind of jarring in contrast to like that opening scene. I will say though that the later scenes with Cage fully revealed did work for me really well. Like he has this interrogation room set piece that is pretty riveting to watch. And he is genuinely creepy there. And I guess I'll go ahead and spoil, the way he looks. He, kind of dresses like a former goth glam rocker who has maybe had some plastic surgery or is like just caking himself with makeup to remain young.
Well, to that plastic surgery remark, like, when he smashes his face against the thing, his nose like falls off immediately.
Yes.
So that was kind of made me think like it was plastic surgery. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
No, that's a good point. But that's an interesting backstory for him to have because you could see like, kind of a sleazy rock god becoming a satanic cult leader. And I'll just call out Mitch here. Mitch, you have a great line in your review comparing his look to Marilyn Manson's. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Do you guys want to talk about like
Yeah.
Longlegs' look?
Yeah, I think I said in
Yeah.
my review that he looks like kind of present day puffy faced Marilyn Manson, spent 10 years like living under a bridge and drinking Steel Reserve, malt liquor. He looks like absolute shit. And it does look like somebody who, whatever sort of style they were into, he also has like a flying V guitar like hanging up on his wall. So like, was he this musician or something once upon a time who's now possessed by a demon, it seems, and like living this insane life making dolls. It does seem like that whatever that was so long ago. He's like just this like decrepit shell of that. It's definitely a thing that when you see his look, you're like, wow, that's a lot of prosthetics like on Nicolas Cage's face. But to me, it worked because it is unsettling and it is just bizarre. I really liked it, but it definitely like took a little bit of getting used to because I did not know what to expect. And he is pretty much unrecognizable.
Oh, absolutely. And that's part of the overall aesthetic of him is what was also unsettling to me. And just add to that, his performance, it's just so unhinged and crazy. Like that interrogation room scene where he basically kills himself by smashing his face into the table after saying, "Hail Satan." Like, God damn, that sequence was just riveting and like so unnerving and shocking. I loved it. And I also feel like we're so far into this review. How did you guys feel about Micah Monroe? Her performance, her character, like how she played the part. She's been in several horror joints over the years. How do you think this stacks up with her filmography?
It's an interesting character because she's really socially awkward. That's evident in the scene where she meets the FBI director's family, Blair Underwood's family.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this I thought it was a brilliant moment where she's looking in his little girl's room and she sees a trophy that has been disfigured and she's instantly drawn to that because it's kind of grisly and she can use her, crime scene skills to talk about that. And she's almost more comfortable talking about like crime scene details than she is when just having everyday small talk. I thought she was great. And she definitely gave a sense of like weight to her character. You got the sense that she was haunted by her past. She kind of carries that weight in every scene. The social awkwardness was conveyed really well. And as well as her kind of strange gravitation toward grisly things. She was, despite being kind of strange, you couldn't help but root for her. I thought she was great.
Yeah. Mitch, how about you?
Yeah, I agree. I thought that, she's giving a very subdued performance. In fact, pretty much everybody in the movie besides Nicolas Cage is giving like a very subdued performance. And there are times I think I wish we had more moments like the one you just mentioned, Sam, that were really revealing in a very like clever and seemingly like very authentic way. But she manages to do the type of performance where she's reserved in a way that draws you as the audience in, as opposed to reserved and she's very dull, and I feel like, I imagine as an actor, that's an incredibly difficult thing to pull off. And so, and she just has such an interesting face, as well. She has just like those very big eyes and like those cheekbones. She's just a striking person to look at on screen. So I really enjoyed her character and thought Maika Monroe did a great job. I could have used even maybe a little bit more, but yeah, I was really impressed, and it's just great to see her as the lead in something again. I haven't seen her in much since It Follows.
Yeah, same here. I know she's been around, but yeah, I loved her performance too. I think it brought a certain introspective quality to it in terms of her being like haunted and being someone who is like Sam said, very kind of socially awkward and very kind of distant and reserved. I really liked it. There was something else I was gonna bring up. Oh, to kind of circle back to the whole birthday thing. Yeah, I agree. Blair Underwood not like realizing that it's not so much that it's that, he didn't realize or he didn't bring up like, oh, hey, my daughter's birthday. Like, this is weird. It's more for my taste. It's more that he, like, I feel like the movie doesn't really, the movie could have created a scenario where he didn't believe any kind of supernatural thing or any kind of extrasensory thing. And like, that would be a good excuse as to why, like, okay, well, it doesn't matter that my daughter's birthday is this day, because it'll be fine. But the movie doesn't really do that. But the thing that bothered me about it is the way that the movie kind of seeds that by having like her say like, oh, will you come to my birthday party? I'm immediately like, oh, her birthday is okay. So the movie's going to end with this thing at her birthday party. And it's going to be that. And like, not so much that I could guess what was happening, but it was just like, I wish that was a little bit more disguised. I don't know.
I also wish that there had been an extended sequence that really drove home the horror of a father killing his family. Yes. And like how outlandish that is. You see brief flashbacks of the killings and you hear about them through like 911 calls. Yeah. And maybe that's enough. I mean, those sequences were scary. I felt like if it had grabbed us early on with like a really grisly, intense sequence, maybe there would have been more tension building up to that birthday party at the end. Yeah. I don't know.
Yep. Any final thoughts on Longlegs? Anything we didn't touch on, or should we close it out?
To go to the next.
All right, cool. Well, that is our review of Longlegs. It is in theaters, and we, let us know what you thought of the movie and our review and everything. And yeah, now we're going to go on to our secondary review. Okay, and before we get to our secondary review, I want to take a quick moment to remind you that if you like the show, please take a moment to follow us on social media and subscribe to and rate the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and whatever your preferred podcast app is. And don't forget to subscribe to the Obsessive Viewer Podcast YouTube channel as well. And if you're interested in starting a podcast of your own, you can go to Libsyn and use the promo code OBSESS. When you sign up for a new account, you can get up to 3 months free, or 2 months free, depending on when you sign up, and we'll get a commission on it as well. So more details on that in the show notes. And now back to the show.
They tell me I view obsessively.
So, MaXXXine. Your agent tells us you're quite a popular name in adult film and entertainment. Is that correct? I'm curious, did you always want to be in that line of work?
I always wanted to be famous.
If you need to read off the sides we gave you, just go ahead, all right?
I know the lines.
She turns to the camera and, through her trauma, addresses the lens directly.
Name 5 celebrities who got their start in horror movies.
Jamie Lee Curtis, John Travolta, Demi Moore, Brooke Shields, and
MaXXXine fucking Minx.
I don't like working out here with that freaking Night Stalker guy on the loose.
The Night Stalker.
Night Stalker.
Night Stalker.
Terrorized.
All right, and so for our secondary review, we're going to be reviewing MaXXXine, which came out in theaters on July 5th, and it's the premise, according to IMDb, is in 1980s Hollywood, adult film star and aspiring actress MaXXXine Minx finally gets her big break. But as a mysterious killer stalks the starlets of Hollywood, a trail of blood threatens to reveal her sinister past. This movie was written and directed by Ty West. It stars Mia Goth, Elizabeth Debicki, Giancarlo Esposito, Halsey, and Kevin Bacon. And I think we're going to do a non-spoiler review, hence why I played the clip from the trailer early. So let's get into MaXXXine. First, of course, this is the concluding chapter of Ty West's trilogy that began with X and Pearl. How did you guys feel about those two movies, and how'd you feel about MaXXXine? Mitch, do you want to get us kicked off?
Yeah, sure. I loved X and Pearl. Pretty much like equally, those were neck and neck for some of the best movies of 2022. I am an easy mark for something that is, a throwback like X to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and these grimy 70s backwoods slashers. And something like Pearl too. Love a good movie that's like a deterioration into, homicidal lunacy like that. So that was also awesome. And it brought some really unexpected visual flourishes and influences into that as well. So I thought Ty West, who's very hit or miss, I thought before those two movies, really stepped up his game in a way that kind of blew me away, to be honest. And just most importantly, I feel like we are in this time where I really liked Longlegs, but where horror movies are just so relentlessly like grim.
Yes.
And they're either incredibly grim or they're obsessed with kind of having some sort of message about trauma or this like kind of like big social message where almost those messages or that thematic stress like gets in the way of just like telling a fun story. Yeah. And I loved how X actually has some things to say about, aging and stardom and things like that, and as well as kind of this meta layer about filmmaking. But none of that gets in the way of just being a really fun and enjoyable slasher. So loved those. MaXXXine was a pretty big step down, unfortunately, I thought, from X and Pearl. I would give it a mild recommendation, like a 3 out of 5 stars, I would say. Where those previous two were like 4.5 probably stars for me. Wow. I thought that MaXXXine, it's a weird one because this movie feels like it's both overstuffed and meandering at the same time. It's a really odd sensation watching this movie where it's trying to do all of these different things, but I feel like it's never really following through on any one to a really satisfying degree. Like, is it the story of like a power hungry Mia Goth just working her way up the Hollywood food chain? Like, not really, a little bit. Is it this like satire of like, they say the satanic panic era and like the Reagan 80s, like the classic like 80s excess? A little bit. And is it like a sleazy police procedural like the New York Ripper or Vice Squad? Kind of randomly. I just felt like it was balancing all of these things, but never really doing one to like the fully satisfying way. And the middle of the movie really, I just think, kind of sags under its own weight before taking a really hard turn into something completely different at the very end, which on its own is like a pretty fun idea, but it just didn't hit me as hard because I felt like at that point I was a little bit detached from the movie. That said, there's still fun to be had with the movie. I still enjoyed myself for the most part watching it. Anything that is kind of anything that is this grimy and sleazy and violent, I'm going to enjoy to some degree. The filmmaking is really beautiful, like the way they recreate the like the 80s New York City. I mean, felt like a lower budget version of like kind of like what Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was doing with the 60s. Loved references. I mean, there's a horror movie reference every 2 seconds that end in this movie, and they're all done in very subtle, clever ways. Really deep cuts too, like movies like Savage Streets, and they're using like the Brian De Palma split screen. So I appreciate like kind of the film nerdiness of Ty West and how this was clearly a labor of love for him, but unfortunately it just felt like the script was like a bit of a mess. And I think the biggest crime of all is that I feel like this is of the 3 movies, this is the one where Mia Goth has like the least to do. If that makes sense. She starts off the movie with like this incredible monologue. And you're just like, all right, here we go. I'm buckling in, like,
right.
And then the movie just kind of stalls out for a very long time. There are a couple awesome sequences we can talk about, and an amazing turn from Kevin Bacon. But I did find this one fairly disappointing. If you like the first 2, I would recommend that you see it. You might enjoy it more than I did, but I can't help but be disappointed because the first 2 were so great, and this felt like a pretty significant step down.
Well said. And I think we'll agree on a lot of things here. Sam, through your trauma, can you address the podcast audience? And
I did love that joke. I did love that joke in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Mitch. I agree that it feels both overstuffed and kind of thin. The trailer for this really excited me because it had a lot of cool elements.
Amazing trailer.
Oh yeah. And like bringing in a real killer with the Night Stalker in the same way that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood did with the Manson family. That really hooked me. The appearance of the Psycho set intrigued me. Unfortunately, there's really not much done with it beyond one sequence. Like Longlegs, this one felt like it kind of rushed toward a really bizarre, otherworldly ending that ultimately just felt really underwhelming to me. I didn't feel like the third act was really that scary. I was kind of hoping it would pull a bit of revisionist history in the same way that Quentin Tarantino did in how it dealt with the Night Stalker. I'll just leave it there. I don't want to spoil anything. Yeah, I mean, this is supposedly the last part of this whole series of movies for Ty West. So I was really hoping it would end with a bang, and this one kind of ends with a whimper. I still had a good time though. It's a great sort of nostalgia fest, a great sort of trip back in time. I think Mia Goth is great fun to watch. She's a very different on-screen personality than Micah Monroe, who's more reserved. I think Mia Goth is like the exact opposite. She's really big and theatrical and always fun to watch. But yeah, ultimately a little underwhelming.
Yeah, I'll chime in and pretty much agree across the board. So this will be a fun review. But no, there is a lot to like about it in terms of Mia Goth's performance. Like, even with her being a little bit underused in it, she still gives a really good performance and does a good job of kind of closing that circle for that character, closing the arc. But I agree a lot with you guys about the ending, the third act, how I'd hate to make this kind of criticism again, but it kind of felt like a foregone conclusion. Like, it kind of felt like there was no mystery to it. It kind of felt a little bit obvious. But and the way that it plays out, it feels a little bit more stylized than I would have liked it to be. Even with some interesting kind of Ty West kind of hand on some things, it still felt a little bit more stylish and flashy than I would have liked, whereas I would have more preferred a more introspective kind of finale for the character, which we get a little bit of, but it felt a little bit inconsistent. The violence, the spurts of violence throughout it were really, really solid, really good. There's one that made me cringe so bad in the beginning. If you guys, I'm sure you guys and any men listening will agree. And I liked how the events of X still weighed on MaXXXine. Like, that's obviously a pretty standard thing. Like, obviously this huge event, but I like the way that played out and played into the plot of this movie and the arc for MaXXXine. So it's a mixed bag. I ended up rating it 3 stars. With a little heart. But I also want to mention that, like, that kind of scuzzy 80s aesthetic, that underbelly of LA in the 80s was really gross and well done. I really like that aspect of it. So yeah.
And it does tap into the fears specifically for women in that era of, just walking the streets. The Night Stalker was obviously, a terrible case, and also it paints Hollywood as this sort of predatory place where, young starlets are kind of whisked away to the Hollywood Hills and, disappear forever. And it taps into the pressures put on young actresses. Like, even when MaXXXine is supposedly getting her chance at legitimacy outside of the adult film industry with a horror movie, during her audition, she's still asked to show her breasts. So it's kind of showing how they can't escape their sexualization. But thankfully, it's not too heavy-handed with any of that. Like Mitch said, it touches on these ideas without kind of hitting you over the head with them.
Yeah, and also I just want to correct. I said this took place in New York City earlier. Obviously, it takes place in LA.
I didn't even register that.
I think the reason is because this movie does these sleazy neon and alleyways and stuff, like kind of in a Taxi Driver type mode that I just like immediately associate with New York City. But yeah, I agree. I wish it kind of stuck to like one lane a little bit more. But I do agree that, like, I appreciate that Ty West, first and foremost, it surprised me, like, a lot of the online vitriol about this movie. Maybe just people were disappointed, but people seem to really be delighting and tearing this movie apart. And to me, it's like, this is meant to be fun and silly. And I appreciate that. Even if this movie I don't think is fully successful, I do appreciate that Ty West is trying to package some of these ideas into a really accessible and enjoyable ride, rather than just being really morose and heavy-handed, like you said, Sam. Yeah, I think, to me, that what I wanted this movie to have, like, a little more energy from was like everything with like Kevin Bacon, like any scene with Kevin Bacon in this movie and Mia Goth like facing off had this kind of energy and verve that I felt like the rest of the movie really lacked. I wish they had almost leaned more into the campiness at times. Because I feel like a lot of the stuff with like Elizabeth Debicki's character and Mia Goth felt very just kind of languid and I don't know, just downcast in a way that the rest of the movie wasn't. And I felt like it spent a lot of time on that. So I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I do wish there was more Kevin Bacon stuff in it with him and Mia Goth as well. I don't have anything to add, just agreeing.
Yeah. Elizabeth Debicki's character, and I don't know if this was on purpose, like to satirize her, but she is kind of dead serious, and that's hard to take seriously when her character is directing a sequel to a demonic possession movie.
Yeah.
But she acts like she's this sort of like wise guide for Mia Goth's character, and like maybe that's the joke, is that she's just sort of a lowbrow horror director trying to make something important, like elevated horror. But yeah, that did kind of slow the movie down, as Mitch said.
But I do think that that's maybe accurate to the era, or at least the story being told. Just like the idea of an artist kind of having a more inflated opinion or being propped up when I don't know how to phrase that, like as someone who is wanting to do more but not conscious or aware of like their place in the industry there. Much like me with podcasting. But I will say that there were parts of this movie throughout it, like in terms of the kind of satirizing of the movie industry, that I feel like this might ruffle some feathers for you guys, because I think you guys are both fans of this, more fans of this than I am. But this felt like at times like what I wanted Scream 3 to be, because Scream 3 is my least favorite of the franchise. I still like it a lot because I love that franchise. But I feel like this does a better job of kind of exploring that Hollywood satire in a way. And also just kills during like filming of a movie is always good. So
yeah, we'll have to have like a full Scream a full Scream episode that you should have Sam and I on before the seventh one drops. Because I would love to talk about that, because I am not a fan of the new ones, but I do kind of like that Scream 3 comparison to MaXXXine, and I kind of like Scream 3 because it kind of goes silly and broad at the end, and this does as well. Although we'll have to save this for spoilers, but I just felt like where this movie ultimately leads felt very disparate from everything that kind of came before it, in a way that a lot of people are saying like, oh well, this movie is very clunkily paced and all over the place, and just weird because it's taking inspiration from giallo movies, and that's how giallo movies are. But it's like, well, yeah, like giallo movies are also kind of like boring and clunky. So like, I don't know. I don't know if like that it necessarily like makes me like the movie more. It's not taking the good qualities of giallo and putting them into something better. So
interesting. Yeah. I liked it, but I just the ending. I'm trying to think. Should we do a spoiler section? Because I already played the trailer. That's what I'm thinking in my head.
I feel like anything else I have to say on the movie would be a spoiler.
Okay. Yeah, let's go ahead and go into spoilers. I'll play the clip from the trailer again and then try to discreetly edit out the clip from the trailer earlier, but I also referenced it earlier. So here we go. Clip from the trailer for MaXXXine. When we come back, we're going to be spoiling the movie. Check the show notes for timestamps, all that. Here's a clip from the trailer again.
So, MaXXXine. Your agent tells us you're quite a popular name in adult film and entertainment. Is that correct? I'm curious, did you always want to be in that line of work?
I always wanted to be famous.
If you need to read off the sides we gave you, just go ahead, all right?
I know the lines.
She turns to the camera and, through her trauma, addresses the lens directly.
All right, so spoilers on for MaXXXine. The first thing I want to say is the way that it kind of is revealed that it's her father and he's coming back to whatever. I was just kind of lukewarm on it. I kind of, like I said before, I saw it coming, and then once it played out, I was just like, okay, that like it took the wind out of the sails for me.
Did you see it coming that it would be her dad?
Oh yeah. From the beginning, I was like, okay, well, if it's someone from her past, like I thought briefly, like, oh, did Pearl and Howard like have a kid or something?
That was what I was thinking. It was going to be somebody from X, like that we either didn't meet or we didn't expect to still be alive.
Yeah. I thought that briefly.
Also, another thing this movie doesn't really follow through on is it's kind of like trying to be a direct follow-up to X at times. But really all we get is just like, oh, I think, is that Pearl over there? Like, know, old lady Pearl over there? Oh, no, it's not. And I just felt like you could have removed those entirely, like any references to X entirely from the movie, and it wouldn't really have changed anything. So I kind of was hoping that this trilogy would kind of come full circle, like narratively. So, and I didn't rewatch X or Pearl, but I don't think MaXXXine's dad is referenced too much, right?
Sort of. Well, here's the thing, like that's kind of why I saw it coming, because I rewatched X and Pearl before, and like X ends with a shot of him giving his like sermon on the TV, and it's revealed at that moment that it's like the devil took my daughter MaXXXine, and shows a picture of Mia Goth. That's how X ends.
Okay. Yeah. That's interesting. I did not put that together.
Yeah. And so when there was so many references to someone from her past and everything, I was like, that's literally the only person it could be, like, to fit narratively within everything. And then I did think briefly like, oh yeah, well maybe it's like someone connected to Pearl and Howard, but also that didn't really fit that well. So, I did like the way that X was kind of utilized in this movie, at least in the head cast thing. I thought that was really cool to see her there, and like it vaguely resemble Pearl from X was really cool visually. And also like the nut crushing scene, like that was really cool to me. Like very, very gratuitous and over the top and disgusting, but I liked seeing that side of MaXXXine and how she kind of reckons with what she did and what she went through in X, in the way that materializes with her, not taking any shit from that guy and making him strip down, and yeah, I don't know.
Well, that was the kind of energy I wanted more of in this movie.
Yeah, it didn't sustain throughout the whole movie. I agree with you there.
It's not great practice to review a movie by saying what it's not. You should probably critique like what it actually is. Yeah. But I'm gonna break that rule here for a second, because I feel like this movie has these hints of like oh, this is going to be Mia Goth, not taking any shit, fucking up anybody who comes in, who gets in her way. And she's going to be kind of like a star no matter what. And meanwhile, there's like this killer out there. So she has to like evade this killer that's, going after her and her friends. I feel like that's a very much more simple premise than what we ultimately get. And I just find like, why didn't they just take those threads and go with that? Because what we ended up with just felt a little all over the place. And that third act, while like on its own, it's pretty fun. It's fine. It really just felt like all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're a different movie now. And I don't know. So
man,
that I found pretty disappointing.
Yeah. And the whole way, and Sam, I'll let you talk. I swear. I feel like, but that whole idea of like it being about, it could have been about her, like just taking no shit and trying, like grabbing for power. That would have been that. If that was what this movie was, it would have been a much better fitting movie for the trilogy, because you have X with all of that, them trying to make like an artsy, dirty movie. And then you have Pearl, which is Pearl's backstory, wanting to be a star and failing. And then it would have been so great to kind of close that narrative loop with having MaXXXine be just this cutthroat person who's willing to do everything to gain stardom, and then gain stardom at the end. That would have been really, that would have been better. So, Sam, what do you think?
Oh, it's just kind of funny how this is coming full circle back to what I was saying about Longlegs, which, like Mitch just said about MaXXXine, in terms of wanting it to follow, an ordinary serial killer. That's kind of what I wanted from Longlegs, but then both movies take this satanic route. And I will say, in comparison, I think the satanic stuff is much more effective than Longlegs. Here, it just, with it ending with her father and the, like sacrifice or whatever happens in the climax, like that just felt, it just fell so flat for me. And Longlegs, like, even though the satanic doll stuff maybe isn't entirely what I wanted, like I can't help but admit that it was fun and entertaining. Like, right. I just think the stuff with her father at the end of this just didn't land very well.
It also just like when we are all of a sudden those detectives kind of come to save the day, I was like, oh right, Bobby Cannavale and Michelle Monaghan are in this movie, and they really have nothing to do. And that should be this like awesome moment of triumph where you're like, hell yeah, like, but you're just kind of like, oh right, they're in this movie too. I will say I loved a couple of the little moments in that scene where Michelle Monaghan comes out and she's like, I got him, and she has like a crucifix through her head. That was a great
that was
moment.
Wild.
And I obviously the shotgun blast to the face. I mean, Ty West is incredible with practical gore, and you know, that's no exception. You love a good practical head explosion, and this was a good one.
Absolutely, and not to nitpick the whole cops coming into the rescue thing, but like that's not like, I was in that moment. I was like, okay, well, how is she going to get out of this? And in my head, I was like, well, she has to get out of it on her own. Like she needs to, like it needs to be like the protagonist rescuing herself thing. And then the cops come up, and then like she does, get the knife out, and she's able to free herself and everything. So that satisfies that. But like the whole thing with the cops showing up, like the only reason that they're there is because they were following her, and it's just established earlier that they were following her. So it's like, it's just a waiting game for them to show up. And it kind of feels like a little bit lazy writing to just maybe have a reason for them to be there. I don't know, but that's nitpicking to no end. But I think overall, the ending was okay. It just didn't work for me as well as I would have liked it to. Yeah. Any other thoughts on MaXXXine in spoilers?
Not really. I mildly enjoyed it, but that I would say that was probably one of my most anticipated. I mean, not even probably. It was easily one of my most anticipated movies of the year, and it was a bit of a. I'm sad to say it did not, end the trilogy on a high note.
That's too bad.
I will say, like, even though we had issues with both of these movies, it's exciting to see them stir up so much excitement at the box office and in theaters, and for them to be this highly anticipated. Like, I think we're in a golden era for horror right now. Kind of maybe similar to the 80s with the slasher film craze, and the popularity of horror movies at that time. It's exciting to see a return to that kind of popularity now.
And I'll also just say too that I have to give props to Ty West for the fact that he did this trilogy. It's incredibly unique. I mean, there's never been anything like this in horror, where each entry is so distinct in and of itself, with all these interweaving characters and this thematic through line that, even if it didn't stick the landing, I'm just so glad that something like this exists. It really is like incredibly ambitious. And, I would so much rather have a director taking a big swing like this, even if it doesn't fully connect, than like Night Swim and Imaginary or whatever the hell, Blumhouse, shits out for $5 million.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that like Pearl was filmed in secret or in tandem with X, and then he just was like, oh, by the way, there's going to be a prequel. And then after that, it's like, oh, by the way, it's a trilogy. We're going to have MaXXXine. It's all good. Like, that just, I don't know. I really like that. I think that's really cool. Yeah. And horror is like it's a golden age of horror. It's been for the last few years, I think, just like there's so much good horror out and coming out, and that's not going to stop this year, because here in, I think, a few weeks or maybe a month or so, we've got Afraid, which is Megan but a house. So that should be something.
Hey, now we also have Trap.
That's true.
And I don't say that jokingly. I think that looks legitimately cool.
The trailer is awesome for that. That has a great trailer. Shyamalan doesn't have the strongest track record, or I should say the most consistent track record. But like, son of a bitch, I will go see every movie he puts out.
I will always root for him. I won't
always turn out for one.
I won't like a lot of the things that he does and a lot of the movies he puts out, but I will root for him until he proves me wrong. He has many times.
Look at a movie like Old. That was not a good movie.
No.
But it was an interesting bad movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You definitely remember it.
What's funny is that like I can watch something like Old and think like, oh, good God, that was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
But then I still say, I can't wait to see what he does next.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's not nothing. That's not nothing for sure.
Nope. Yeah. So that's our review of MaXXXine. I rated it 3 stars. What did you guys end up rating it again?
I was at 3 as well.
3.
3.
Nice.
Gentleman's 3 all the way.
Yes.
Definitely a gentleman's 3.
Yes. So that's our review. Let us know what you thought of MaXXXine, and whatever. You know how to reach me. Matt at obsessivehero.com, or on all the socials. So to wind down the episode, do you guys want to do a round of potpourri to kind of close things out? If you guys are game, it'll be quick, I promise.
Yeah.
Okay. let's, I'll start. So Potpourri, for those who don't know, I'll go last. So Potpourri is a section of the podcast where we close out the episode with movies or shows, whatever we've watched lately and something we want to talk about. We go kind of round robin. So it's whatever we want as long as it smells good. And Sam, would you like to get us kicked off on Potpourri in this episode of The Obsessive Viewer?
Sure. So I have a fitting movie to bring up, given what we've talked about. It's a thriller starring Micah Monroe called The Stranger. And it was actually developed as a Quibi series with, short segments. It's about
quick bites, if you will.
She plays a rideshare driver who basically has the night from hell. Dane DeHaan is her passenger who just wreaks all havoc. It's sort of similar to Collateral, the serial killer in a cab thriller from years ago. So it was developed as a Quibi series way back in like 2020. It was released as just one feature-length movie this year. Really fun movie. Lots of twists and turns. It's lean. It's fast-paced. Mike Monroe is great. Just a fun little movie to check out on Hulu.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I would be curious to check that out. Does it feel like it's pieced together, or did they edit it into actually?
That was my question.
Okay.
I always wonder how that viewing experience is.
It actually flows really well, really naturally. It doesn't feel like, here's the cut to commercial that they would put in there. No, it feels like it flows naturally.
Okay, interesting. And it's on Hulu?
Yes.
Nice.
Micah Monroe is a cool actress to follow. She's had a little It Follows reference there.
Nice.
She does a lot of cool genre stuff.
Yeah, she does. So I would recommend that one.
Nice. Mitch, what do you got? What do you have for Potpourri?
Yeah, just like any recommendation that I've seen recently.
Yeah, anything you want to talk about?
I've got one that if you watch this and enjoy it, it might send you down a rabbit hole you may spend months in. This is a film called Don't Let the Riverbeast Get You. It is from 2012, and you can stream it for free on Tubi. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Tubi, but it's one of the best streaming services.
Tubi has so many gems.
Unbelievable. Don't Let the Riverbeast Get You is, I would almost describe it as, it is a micro budget film made for pretty much no money. I would almost describe it as a Wes Anderson movie, early Wes Anderson, by way of like a 50s schlocky rubber monster movie.
Sounds amazing.
You've never seen a movie with this kind of tone. It is not a so bad it's good. There are shades of that. It exists in the universe of a Tommy Wiseau or like a Neil Breen, but the dialogue is intentionally funny. And it has some great gags. I mean, it really is just incredibly charming in bizarre, but it has this quaint small town feel. And the main actor is played by this guy named Matt Farley, who also co-wrote the movie. And he's also a musician. He's released 25,000 songs on Spotify that you can find.
Jesus
under
Christ.
a bunch of different names. Yep. He made an album for every single state, and each song on each album has a major city in that state. So there's like a Carmel, Indiana song.
Wow.
All that. Yep. And the very last of that album series is called "I've Never Left My Hometown," which is also pretty funny. Anyways, this movie, Don't Let the Riverbeast Get You, is just a great rubber monster movie. But almost, I would say 80% of this movie is just about like the relationships of these people in this town and how they're bouncing off of one another. He plays a disgraced tutor who he spotted the Riverbeast, and he was run out of town because he was humiliated. His bride left him at the altar, and he's trying to win her heart back, and along with his other tutor friends. I would highly recommend it. And if you love that movie, he has a lot of these micro budget movies that he's made. I mean, they're amazing. I love them so much as a few of my friends and I watched it, and he just puts a cell phone number out there on his Twitter page, and we texted him, and we Zoomed with him for like an hour.
Oh my God, that's fucking awesome.
So, yeah, shout out to Matt Farley. He's a really cool guy. And I heard about this movie on the Important Cinema Club podcast by Will Sloan, if you guys are familiar with that critic. No. He kind of discovered this movie, and Matt Farley says probably 80% of people who see it have heard about it from him. But Don't Let the Riverbeast Get You. Cannot recommend it enough. It's on Tubi.
Nice. I am definitely going to check that out. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it is great.
Very cool. All right. Well, I will round out Potpourri with a movie that I watched a couple days ago. After watching Longlegs, I really had this hankering for 90s detective procedural serial killer thriller. So I wanted to watch something I didn't know much about. Well, really, I wanted to rewatch The Silence of the Lambs, but it wasn't streaming anywhere. So I ended up watching Copycat from 1995 with Holly Hunter and Sigourney Weaver. And I thought it was very solid. It's a movie about an agoraphobic, I guess she's like a serial killer expert. She gives like lectures and stuff. She's agoraphobic after a traumatic experience, and someone starts killing people, patterning themselves after famous serial killers, which that premise is so freaking good. Like, I would love, this movie is good. It's solid. It is kind of not victim, but it's kind of a prisoner of that like 90s era thriller without really breaking free of it. So it does feel like a little bit dated, to the point where I was like, man, someone could take this and do like a really, really good remake these days. But for what it is, like, it was really solid. It kind of lost me a little bit toward the like third act, common theme in this episode. But it was really solid. I really enjoyed it. There was some pretty good turns in it that I think worked really well. So that's Copycat. I watched it on Paramount Plus. And
I've always wanted to see that.
Nice.
I remember that VHS cover so distinctly from when I was a kid, of like the girl with like the sunglasses and yeah.
As a hardcore fan of all things 90s, I have to ask, or just say really, how dare you say that a movie from the 90s could be improved upon?
Yeah, well,
I'm just kidding. I've actually never seen it.
Oh, really? Interesting. I think you'd like it. I think you'd both like it.
I think so too. Yeah, your enthusiasm makes me more eager to check it out. So that's
really
one
cool.
I've been meaning to get to.
Yeah, I think it really flourishes. Like it really flourishes by the premise alone is just really interesting, and the way that it kind of works out pretty satisfying. So yeah. Well, that is it for Potpourri. And that is it for this week's episode of The Obsessive Viewer. Before we go and before I give my whole spiel at the end, would you guys mind telling people where they can find you online? And if you have anything coming up in terms of film criticism stuff or life stuff even, I don't care. Mitch, do you want to get started?
Yeah, you can find my stuff at Midwest Film Journal. I've been a little sporadic this year, but you can find my whole backlog of reviews and stuff on there, and hopefully I'll kind of pick up the pace a little bit more in the second half of the year. You can find me on Letterboxd at wounded_kite. I'm always, writing out my jumbled thoughts on my Letterboxd, and you can also find me on Twitter at wounded_kite as well.
Nice. Sam?
Yeah, you can find me on Midwest Film Journal as well, and Letterboxd at Sam Movie Man. I don't think I have anything coming up, but stay tuned.
Nice.
That's where you can find me.
Nice. And of course, you can find me on all the socials at Obsessive Viewer. Thank you guys so much for joining me for this episode. It's been a blast, even with me being kind of a little bit not consistent with releasing episodes. I appreciate you guys coming on and chatting with me. And links to all of Mitch and Sam's stuff is in the show notes of this episode. And that's it for this week's episode of The Obsessive Viewer. As always, thank you so much for listening, and make sure to follow the show on social media and subscribe to the podcast on your preferred podcast app. And also check out Obsessive Viewer Podcast's other shows, Tower Junkies, a Stephen King podcast hosted by Tiny and myself, and Anthology, the Twilight Zone and classic sci-fi podcast hosted by me. Next week on the show, I'm going to be reviewing Twisters and something else. I'm not sure what. Maybe Fly Me to the Moon. I'm not sure, but we'll see. Until then, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week on the podcast.
See you guys.
And now, enjoy this short clip from a recent Patreon-exclusive episode. For the full episode and more Patreon-exclusive content, sign up at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Elsewhere in the show, he has this relationship with Terry, this trans woman who he is somewhat ashamed of, but it's presented as if he's ashamed of being with her, but there's more context with that hidden trauma. So it's a little bit kind of back and forth with presenting it as like, oh, I'm ashamed to be with this trans woman, rather than what is uncovered in that fourth episode is more that I have very heavily damaged psychological and physical trauma from my past that is something that I haven't dealt with, that he hasn't dealt with. So that is kind of manifesting in both him shielding himself from falling in love with this woman that he's with, Terry, while also being a little bit more drawn to Martha, who is demonstrably not a good influence on him. Thank you for listening to the Obsessive Viewer podcast. This episode was produced and edited by me, Matt Hurt. If you have feedback, thoughts on our episodes, or just want to connect, you can email me at matt@obsessiveviewer.com. For more information on this show, including a full archive of our episodes and show notes, visit obsessiveviewer.com. And if you enjoyed the show, please give us a follow on social media and subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. Also, consider rating and reviewing the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Audible to help increase our visibility and grow our community. If you want to support the show and get early access to new episodes, as well as a steady stream of exclusive episodes, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. For information on more podcasts presented by obsessiveviewer.com, visit obsessiveviewer.com/podcasts. Our theme song is A Little Mad Sometimes by As Good As It Gets. For more of their music, check them out on Spotify and at asgoodasitgetsmusic.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
See this episode's show notes for our unique promo code to get up to 2 months of free podcasting service with Libsyn when you sign up for a new account. Get your show on Apple and Spotify, get helpful stats, and all the support you need to sound your very best.